Hello, my name is John Brink and we are podcasting on the Brink from the capital of northern BC, Prince George. Nice wintry day. It's about 25 below here. Yes, it is. Not bad, typical winter day. Today is a special day and I have a special guest. As we all know, it is today is May the 8th, November the 8th. And the reason that I said May the 5th
May the
is
8th
Remembrance
is
Days in Holland.
Victory in Europe Day.
Yes, and so thanks, Sheldon. And so it is November the 8th and 3 days away from November the 11th, it's Remembrance Day, and therefore a special day for me and a special day for our guest, and so appropriate. So I'm introducing Sheldon. Thank you for being my guest. And are you still teaching at the college? Sheldon?
Yes, it's just about coming on 30 years I've been at CNC now, John. So it's quite a shock to me. I can't understand where those years went.
Can you imagine it? And I forgot to mention your last name, Sheldon Clare. And I got kind of caught up in the dates there, and then
we're all good.
So you've been there for that long, Sheldon, eh?
Yes, I was substitute teaching in the school district for a few years before that, and I was working on my resume because I was looking for other opportunities, and I looked at the mill and I looked at a few other places, and I ran into one of my old instructors, a fellow named John Harris.
Okay.
And he had a big armload of marking, and he had some books in his arms, and we got chatting, and he said, "Sheldon, would you like to write a book review for me?" And he was sort of joking, and he handed me this book review on it was a poetry book, and I said, "Sure, I'll write a book
Forestry
review."
book.
A poetry book.
Oh, poetry, yeah.
And I said, "Sure, I'll do a book review."
Yeah.
So I wrote up a review, published it in the faculty newsletter, and I got a call a week later to come in for an interview for a job.
And that was
and I've been there ever since.
27 years ago?
Almost 30 years ago.
Almost 30 years ago.
I started in January of 92.
Are you originally from
93.
Are you originally from this region or BC? Or?
I am from Prince George, British Columbia.
Were you born here?
Yes, I was. My dad moved here when he was 1 year old in 1930, and the family's been here pretty much ever since.
Wow.
Grandpa worked on the Grand Trunk Pacific Railway in the Prince George, the PGE.
PGE,
and he was working as a boilermaker in the Roundhouse, which is in the museum down there now.
Yeah.
And the Clares have been here a long time. There's a street named for my grandfather.
Well, where is that?
Clare Crescent in the Heritage.
I know that. Yeah.
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 And of course, Dad was on City Council for a number of years.
Yes.
He just passed away this last year, which at a ripe old age of 93 is a pretty distinguished citizen of the city. So.
Absolutely. So you have quite a background, and obviously to my guest, not only from the region but internationally, they say, the Sheldon has so many recognitions on his jacket here. Tell me a little bit about you in regards to your involvement with the Army or or Air Force or.
Well, I was a cadet instructors list officer for about 7-8 years in Prince George and in Vancouver when I was at university.
Right.
I became involved in the Legion when I was in Vancouver. My commanding officer was a Major Ken Parr down at the British Columbia Regiment Cadet Corps that I was working with. He said, in this cadet corps, or in this unit, this regiment, we are members of the 282 Newgate branch at 4th and Fur. It's a Legion that's now closed, sadly.
Yeah.
And he slid an application form across at me and asked for my $18.75, I think it was,
to become a member,
to join up into the Legion.
Yeah.
And I thought to myself, oh my gosh, this is $20. What am I going to do? I'm a starving student. But I had a $20 bill in my pocket, and that was all I had there. And so I gave it to him.
Yeah.
And he took that, he put it in an envelope.
And that's what made it official.
And then he slid across the table 2 bursary applications, one for the Ladies Auxiliary and one for the Legion.
Yeah.
And I filled those out, and I've been trying to pay back the bursary money ever since. So I was a cadet instructors list officer. I was fortunate to do a bit of military stuff beyond what you usually do. I got
Right.
to Germany as a cadet and was in the NATO brigade there, and I was on other NATO
Where was it
exercises.
in Germany that you want to?
I was in Lahr for a little while, and then in Baden-Baden, and most of the exercise areas were in Hohenfels.
Yeah.
And we did a lot of work with the tanks and the carriers, and
Yeah.
the unit I was attached to was the 3rd Battalion of the Royal Canadian Regiment,
Yeah.
and has one of the flyover augmentees,
Yeah.
along with others. And a lot of this was things that I did when I was an Army cadet before becoming a CIL officer, a cadet instructor. It was now called a Cadet Instructor's Cadre Officer.
Right.
I did well in the Army cadets, jump
Yeah.
course, and a fair bit of travel.
Yeah.
And I kept active on the supplementary reserve list until 2010, when they finally had enough of me and took me off because of the number of years on. But I've been very glad to oversee helping set up a reserve unit in Prince George, the
Correct.
Rocky Mountain Rangers. I've been
Yeah.
glad to do that. And I've been active with the Legion and other organizations, which you would have seen from my biography, the National Firearms Association and Alpine Club, the Rod and Gun Club,
Yeah.
and others. My parents kind of instilled in me a strong sense of community service.
Yeah.
Right from a young age.
Yeah.
And I mean, these Legion medals I have here these are for going to too many meetings.
Yeah.
You would kind of understand that as
Yeah,
well. And it's, you show up, you do what you can do
Yeah.
to the best of your ability, and you try to help other people to do the best that they can do.
So what have you got on
Well, these are my service medals. That's my
Yeah.
Special Service Medal and my
Right.
Queen's Diamond Jubilee medal.
Yeah.
And those are the real,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
call real medals, and these
Yeah,
these are Legion service medals.
Yeah.
So,
But still very, very impressive.
it does pop. That's for sure.
Yeah.
You see,
What I like about it, Sheldon, is that I grew up the same as you did. Giving back has always been part of my culture, and is part of who I am. That a lot of people, that even when things are not going that well, or even when I was here and was kind of working on the green chain or anything like that, I always try to the best of my ability. It was part of my culture.
Absolutely.
And still, I've always done that and always tried to do that. And hence, as you know, for the last 20 years, I've always tried to at least speak on a couple of schools, at the week of November the 11th for Remembrance Day, as to why the 2 minutes of silence, what should it really mean, and what role did the Canadians play in the liberation of Holland and Europe, So.
and not a lot of people know that you were in the Air Force in the Dutch Air Force as well. Yeah. I think that's really cool.
And part of Special Forces, nonetheless. So and I also was stationed for a short period in Baden-Baden.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Wow.
They
ate some sand dirt.
It was still an air base, and so I did parachute jumping. That was all part of my training and background, and so it was a good period when I was 18, and what a transition from being this young guy, when I was called into the Air Force in January of I was 18 years old.
Yes.
In 1958, and then all of a sudden at that critical age when you think you know it all, and then all of a sudden you end up in a room with 40 other guys that think they know it all too.
And you have to sort it out.
They get it all sorted out. And then was in Special Forces for 6 months, and got Smith and Wesson and 45 caliber, and then Uzi machine gun and a carabine and all those kind of things. And all of a sudden, so kind of was a life changer in the world. And then for me, it was again special, because I was there. I was born, in November 1940, and then I'm still very aware of what happened. I'm sometimes amazed. I look at my grandchildren, how aware they already are at 3.5, 4.
Well, you had some pretty strong images to form your memories
Yeah.
at 5 years old with
Yeah.
the war ending, but watching the Germans flee before you and the Canadians arrive, and
Yeah.
the memories of having to eat tulips, and
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you're introduced to things like chocolate and cheese and,
Yeah,
and
never
good
had
food.
any, because the hunger winter of 1944-45 were devastating. Thousands of people died from hunger, and and things got pretty bad. For me, my dad, I really never knew him until 1945, because he was called to serve in, I think it was in March or so of 1940, and and the last time that they saw him, just before the bombing of Rotterdam.
Oh,
And then
wow.
for 5 years, they didn't know if he was dead or alive. And then they came back after the Canadians liberated, and he had a helmet with him. There's the bullet that passed, that must have gone just by his head. And he was
Terrifying
underground
stuff.
and fighting underground. All that kind of stuff, but
Formative years for you very much.
Yeah.
And I think we share a few memories of our youth as being exciting times and being young and strong and fit and all of that, and
Right.
it's powerful stuff. And here
Yeah.
we are in Prince George, BC, in a place that's pretty peaceful.
it's paradise.
I think it is.
I look at Canada, as a country, we are collectively so lucky. And I say that many times when people say, well, yeah, blah, 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 and all negative. And I said, hey guys, we are in the most beautiful place in the world. And then BC is the most beautiful province, in my mind, in Canada. And then northern BC is unique.
Well, you and I have both flown into Prince George many times.
Many
and I
times.
remember talking to you on one time we were coming in, and
Yeah.
I remember the sense of relief that I always feel when I come into Prince George, and I saw it in your face as well.
Yeah.
It's home.
Home.
And you look down, and I've heard people say disparaging comments about Prince George my
Yeah.
whole life. Oh, it's a smelly
too.
mill town, and
Yeah.
just go there, make your money, and get out. And
Yeah.
it's nonsense. This is a beautiful green city, and
Yeah.
it's a beautiful winter city too.
And then look around in terms of nature. We got nature all around us. The bears and
Hunting, fishing,
We got
snowmobiling,
lakes
skiing.
all over. There is no place like it, and especially after COVID, people start to appreciate it and saying, "My God, are they lucky?" And now you look at Prince George; it's starting to become a major city. You look at the University of Northern British Columbia, and then CNC, which is very close to my heart.
Yes.
And has always been same as you in BC, and then obviously being honored to have one of the buildings named after
Yes,
me.
absolutely. The Trades and Technology Center.
Yeah.
You've really made your mark on town here, and I think I encourage everybody who lives here to try to aspire to do something for their community. And I think if more of us did, we'd make it even greater than it is.
Exactly.
And we have so much to offer here.
Exactly.
You look at Otway, the skiing, cross-country skiing. We have places like Purdon Ski Hill. It's a jewel just
And the
minutes
best
from town.
is yet to come, Sheldon.
It absolutely is.
And that's kind of the way I look at it. We are still an extremely young city, incorporated in 1914, and then has, when I came here 60 years ago, in 1965, on the bus with my $25.47, and one dream, I wanted to build a lumber mill. And I had $25.47, but attitude, passion, work ethic were the foundation. And, I never doubted that this would happen, and that I would become, I would build my own lumber mill. And the reason that I did is because my dad was in the lumber business in Holland, didn't own one, but managed one, and my grandfather was a master carpenter, and and I just loved the lumber thing of life.
There's something about wood that's very, very calming. As you know, I play the bagpipes, which is a woodwind instrument, and the vibrations and the sound in the thick, hard wood that's used to make the drones
Yeah.
really resonates. And
Yeah.
you also get the smells of fresh cut pine and spruce and birch and all the rest of it for that matter. And this is really the center of that activity too.
Yeah. So I look at your resume or your CV or whatever you call it, your history. You've always been very, very involved, in particular with the Legion and things related to that, and then with the college, but also many, many other things. And and you've always done that, from the time that you were young. As you said, it was part of your culture.
It really is deeply ingrained in me.
Yeah.
I think that the example of my parents being involved in local politics, community service clubs and everything, always was quite inspiring.
Yeah.
And you see how they build up relationships with other people and were able to make their mark on the community.
Yeah, and then your dad in particular, he was involved in city council, and and then just like you said, and that was at a period when Prince George went through major growth from the mid-60s forward, really.
Your timing and his were really quite good.
Yeah,
Timing was so important.
Yeah.
I mean, through the 80s, it wasn't so great.
No.
There were that downturn.
Yeah.
I was fortunate to be in university at that time, and then I came out of university into when it was starting to pick up, and then it started to drop again. And
but that is not untypical for a region like this in particular that is substantially relying on investments in natural resources that tend to sometimes be very typical ups and downs that go with it, right?
Absolutely. The cyclic nature of a resource-based economy is correct. Is the way it is.
But all the while, Prince George and his people were very progressive in terms of bringing in infrastructure that makes it attractive, like for a family to grow. It is now the ideal place to raise a young family.
Absolutely.
And to stay here. I see people that were here at one time coming back to Prince George, partially because of the other areas getting busier and busier, and then COVID was a bit of a wake-up call. And
COVID, I think, was a terrible thing for a lot of people. But I believe that what it forced people to do was to focus on how good we have it.
Yeah.
And it made people realize that this is a jewel.
Yeah.
There are many opportunities that you can do here that mean you can go out on your own without having to worry too much about being... You can go out into the woods here and yell the world is overpopulated, and no one will hear you.
No.
So it's a wonderful place to live.
Yeah. And then the other part about Prince George, what I like about it is that we are the center of the province. And if I look north in particular, but also south to a certain extent, all of this has, relatively speaking, not been developed really. And it's still very much in motion. Like Prince George is already the center of British Columbia and has, becomes the key point for interaction between Asia and the U.S. Midwest and the Eastern Seaboard. We have railroads, we have air, we have roads, all in the center of this part of the province. And it is already, to a certain extent, an inland port, and it will become that even more so as we go forward.
I agree. I think that the sinking of the Titanic, of course, and Charles Melville Hayes going down with it, certainly affected how the layout of the city is, because he was supposed to come here and say, well, this is where the railroad station was going to be.
Right.
And when they made the decision, they made the decision they thought he would have made, and the city grew from that. And I really believe you're right. I think that there is a great deal of opportunity here. It's, as one fellow said to me once, Prince George has many incredible features, none of which are readily obvious on first glance.
Right.
You have to look. You have to get involved. You have to be a joiner. You get into knowing the people and interacting with them, and the next thing you know, this is your home.
Yeah, and then what I usually say, a little bit delicate, but what I usually say, Prince George will be successful not because of the politicians, but in spite of them. You know, because the location and all the things around it, it just has that immense potential. And then I must compliment our local politicians in particular, the past council, the city council, and then the past ones, and then the new incoming one that was sworn in today or yesterday, I believe.
I think yes,
something like
that.
Very,
it's right now at this time.
Yeah,
sure.
and to then look around us and right behind us. I don't know if our guests can see it, but it's right over my shoulder here. You see the new swimming pool.
Oh yes.
And then we got University of Northern British Columbia every time growing, but not only for Prince George, but for the entire region in northern British Columbia. And then obviously we got the College of New Caledonia, of which you're such an important part as well, that has satellites all over the northern BC.
Absolutely.
And is ever growing and growing further as we speak.
The college is growing and it has much potential to do more.
Yeah.
And certainly it has been serving a broad-based population over a wide area.
Yeah.
And I think we still have more students than the university does.
Yeah. Unbelievable. And still growing. I'd like to see a center of excellence that go beyond what we have together with the College of New Caledonia and UNBC, something that kind of not duplicates, but mirrors BCIT, because one of the challenges that we have, if we want to invest as an entrepreneur in Northern BC and attract capital, when we...
opportunities for training your people.
Yeah, because when I made my presentation on when they designated or dedicated the John A. Brink Trades and Technology Center, how many years ago? 25 years ago or something?
Gosh, it is a long time. It used to be the Canadian Tire building, and then they changed it into the Trades and Technology.
Yeah, there was
Center.
an opportunity, and and that needed private involvement. So I try to encourage a lot of people to invest in it, but unfortunately, I'm not blaming anybody. But they wouldn't, while I wanted to, so I did. Well,
you've been a great philanthropist for this community, John. I know even our pipe band has benefited from your support.
I like it.
Yeah.
I like them.
And you've done so much for so many by giving back all the time. I'm just completely impressed by all of that.
It's part of my culture, Sheldon.
Exactly.
You know what it is, the feeling, and if I can do it, I will, and I will keep doing that because that's who I am, and that's how I feel about the region and about BC, but especially Prince George and Northern BC.
Well, it's very, very cool that you were able to come to the country that freed the Dutch back in 1945 when you were a little boy.
Yeah.
And you've grown up here and you've been able to help pay that back, I guess.
Yeah.
Is that the sense you've got of it?
Well, you see that what happened then, on that April the 12th, 1945, when the Canadians came into our city, it had been a tough go, and that what we used to do is, I still remember that, that 44, 45 was hard, 43 was hard, all those times were hard, because since 1943 we had daytime, nighttime bombing, coming from the UK over northern Holland, staying over water as long as they could to avoid flak from down below.
My uncle's brother was one of those Lancaster pilots.
Exactly, and they came right over our area as one area that they entered, and then they would come back, and there is no sound like having 300 planes in the air. I still can hear it, but I cannot describe it.
With those Rolls-Royce Merlin engines roaring like they do, I've heard them working up the Lanket to the Hamilton Air Museum.
Yes.
And it just sends a chill through you.
And it still does to me even now.
I believe it.
You know.
I believe it.
And then my mother used to take us out on the flat roof, not because it's so nice to look at something in the middle of the night, but at least if there was danger, which there always was, at least she could see it, and we were standing with her, and then we could see Germany in the distance, not all that far away. We were only 10 minutes away from Emden, Wilhelmshaven, Hamburg. We could see the sky burning, and then some of those planes came back and were shot at. A number of them didn't make it, crash landed in our area, and so. And then the other thing that I remember is that feeling of hunger. I still can feel that now. The same feeling of hunger if you haven't eaten in 3 or 4 days, and that kind of a feeling. And then. But we did, I had a sister that was 1 year old, a brother 2 years old, and we would have gunny sacks, and we would go into the railroad yards, and the Germans would maybe kick us in our behinds, but they wouldn't shoot us, and we picked up anything edible and burnable, anything.
Yeah, coal or
anything.
Any potatoes that have been thrown out.
Anything, whatever, right? And that's what we would do, and then... so that was that feeling. So what I remember, the feeling of hunger, the cold, because we only had one portion of our house, a small little room, no bigger than this here, and a little heater there, and then we would sit around that heater, and the feeling of cold still goes right through you.
Did you have a radio at all?
No.
That was pretty difficult to have a radio. They would take them away. Not allowed.
No, not allowed.
Yeah.
And then the anxiety, you could feel it even as a kid. I can feel that in my mother, the sense of anxiety. And the natural feeling of a person can feel that. So the combination of all of that, still always kind of stayed with me.
Of course.
And and then there was in a way a feeling of fear of losing your parent. And actually, I got counseling for the inner child when I was already well into my 50s.
Well, of course.
Yeah.
It's a traumatic experience. It's not
and
a surprise.
PTSD and all those things, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing, I have to share this with you, is that I'm a realist. And I am, and then so, so the Canadians were behind our house from here, 50 feet away, and we would go there every morning, and everybody was called Johnny, and we could all interact, but we didn't speak the language, but we did, right? And they fed us bread with cheese and butter, and chocolate bars, and we would go there every morning, and then so. That's what we did. And then one of them gave me a rucksack, and the rucksack, right from that point forward, I knew I would go to, not just because of the rucksack, but I admired them so much, that I knew from that point forward I would go to Canada. The land of my heroes.
I have been to the Netherlands, Holland, France, Belgium, a lot of places in Europe, Germany, many times.
Yeah.
And one trip I took was in 1992 when I was on the Legion's Youth Pilgrimage of Remembrance.
Right.
And we were there with one World War I veteran, several World War II veterans.
Yeah.
And I'm a piper, so I had my bagpipes, and we would go to various war cemeteries and hold little services and meet the local people.
Yeah.
And I was always astounded at the incredible welcome that the Dutch people gave Canadians.
Oh yeah.
It was unbelievable. I'm walking down the street carrying my bagpipes in my kilt and all of the rest of that.
Yeah.
And this gentleman, he stops me on the street. He says, "Excuse me, you are British?" And I go, "No, Canadian." And then he went, "Canadian! Oh my gosh, you must come to dinner at my house and meet my daughters."
Absolutely.
I couldn't believe it.
Oh no, that's very much so. And it goes right up to the little kids there, then,
Looking after the graves.
Yeah.
The candle ceremonies.
Absolutely.
Oh,
yeah.
It's
very
incredible. And I think people here, they don't completely understand the depth of gratitude
That's why I talk about it.
the
Right?
Europeans have for the liberation that you experience personally. And we don't, like, you can talk about it. You can show pictures. I've taken many pictures of war cemeteries and shown them to my students over the years. But nothing quite pulls at your soul like going there, walking the ground,
no question about
touching those stones, reading those names, and seeing those people who pass by those places every day.
Correct.
Because we don't have that here.
Yeah.
We have our cenotaph, the empty tomb, with the names of those who went and either didn't come back or died later of their wounds.
Correct.
And those lists from all these little communities all over Canada are small by comparison. But when you see all of those communities connected in those big cemeteries at Oosterbeek and Grosbeek and Arnhem and so many other places,
all over them,
it really pulls at your soul. It really does. So I understand exactly your message when you're talking about that, because it's the right message.
So then what happened, then I came here. I wanted to go when I was 17, but they wouldn't let me, my parents.
You had to go to the Air Force.
I was drafted when I was 18, so I was going to go before that, but he said no, and then I was drafted, and then I went when I was 24. And again, you can relate to this, is that what I did not know is I was not exactly an academic scholar. I failed grade 3, and nobody fails grade 3, really. And then I failed grade 7 3 times.
I'm sure you were a very energetic student, John.
You know the rest of the story, a little, so in any event, then they said, what are we going to do with them, right? So they were considering suggesting they send me to the mentally challenged school. But they didn't do that. They sent me to become a furniture maker. And so that's what I thought. I became a furniture maker. And then from there on in, I went into the Air Force, obviously, and was drafted. But then, so now a couple of things had happened. My dream was still to go to Canada. I loved the lumber side because my dad was involved in it. My grandfather was a master carpenter, and then the other problem that I had, Sheldon, is that I was a happy individual. I was go individual, but I felt that I had failed. So because how do I build a career? Because as soon as I'm applying someplace, you say, okay, where are your diplomas? But I have no diplomas, so, and how about your schooling? Well, grade 7 3 times, so anyway.
Well, it's almost the German line, deine Papiere bitte, your papers please. And I think this would resonate with someone who had gone through the occupation too.
Exactly.
Am I right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yep.
Anyway, so I kind of felt I had to start from the ground up again. And so I made up my mind. I was already quite successful in Holland. Amazingly, actually, I worked for one of the largest importing firms in Western Europe, and somehow was successful, but I didn't feel that way. And I felt I had to start from the ground up. And so I took $150 with me, 1 suitcase, 3 books, a couple of sets of clothes, and then I took the flight to Montreal, and then by train to Vancouver. Because I wanted to go into the lumber, 4 days, 5 nights, and then took the bus to. And then I talked to a German fellow in Vancouver, because I could speak German, but not so much English at all, virtually, and a little bit of German, because we close to them. And then told them that what I wanted to do. He said, Prince George, that's where you got to go. 1965, they're building sawmills in Plenty, that's where you have to go. So I took the bus to Prince George, came off the bus, had 20, my employees actually made this, I just had to show to everybody. It says $25.47. That's what I had in my pocket when I came off the bus. The other thing that it says, the foundation of my life is attitude, passion, work ethic, what follows is success. Anyway, that's what I did. And, so now, so I had no job. And then from there, and then I became a cleanup man. And then, and then at one of the sawmills. And then very quickly, within a year, I was a superintendent. Can you believe it? Up on the largest mills here. And then what happened is then the sales manager, invited me to his house. And I still didn't speak the language well. And, and I was nervous about it. So he invited me to his house. And the fellow's name was Jerry Wilmot. And so I was quite nervous, and we went there, just by myself, and I went for dinner. And then we started talking about, okay, where are you from in Holland, and then he had been in Holland.
As an officer.
He was part of the Canadian Army.
Wow.
And he was an officer, a captain in the Canadian Red Cross. And he was in the schoolyard behind my house.
Wow.
Can you believe that?
That's
why I'm saying I'm a realist. Those things cannot happen, right? You don't go halfway around the world and meet them.
I have done this kind of thing in strange places too. Frankfurt Airport, I walk into people I know, right? It happens. But this is remarkable.
Let me add one more thing to it then. So you know where my mill is.
I do.
Yeah, my mill is on River Road. You can virtually nearly see it from here.
Very close to the Clare house that used to be in the cache.
That's where it was, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
I think it's actually probably was right on where your mill site is.
Right. So the road was called Planer Road. The reason that they called it Planer Road, because in the 40s, 50s, there were about 600 sawmills around Prince George. They would go to the bush, cut the lumber, put it on the truck, and then sell it to the planer mills that would then shave it, make it nice and smooth, and then load it on cars, rail cars, that send it then mainly to the United States.
And a lot of the wood from here during the war was used to build the aerodromes and classrooms for the Commonwealth Air Training Camp.
Absolutely. And so that's where I set up my mill in 1975. And the location of that particular location there where I'm sitting now, with most of the mill that I built in 1975, 47 years ago, there used to be a planer called Norman M. Smith. And up to 1964, Norman M. Smith was owned by Captain Jerry Wilmot.
Ah.
How could that be?
What an incredible coincidence.
How can it be?
It's fate.
Is it?
I think so.
Yeah, but I say, that's the captain in my schoolyard, when I was 5 years old.
Yeah. There's a tie there.
Yeah.
Life is full of small choices. We make all these small choices every single day, and they can have huge consequences. Little choices about to turn left or turn right. It all makes a difference in how you end up where you are.
Right.
You talked to this fellow on the train, and he told you to go to Prince George. You made a choice. You didn't have to go to Prince George. No. Vancouver looked nice.
Yeah.
You went all the way across Canada on a train.
Right.
And for a European, that must have been quite an interesting trip.
I couldn't believe it. I wanted to step out and walk alongside. I said, when are they going to speed up the train here? Because I was used to the trains that run at about 120 miles an hour.
Yes,
right?
And stop at every village. And this train is going to go for days.
For days.
Yeah.
And saying, my God, are we not there yet?
It's like a small child.
Yeah.
I remember running into a German veteran at a festival out in Burns Lake. And we were there with the pipe band, and he came up to me and he said, "Oh, you're Scottish Highlanders." He said, I remember you guys from the war. And I was like, well, we're a pipe band. It's nothing like that. But he goes, when I was taken prisoner at Tobruk, they took me across the ocean to Montreal, and they put me on a train. And I knew we were going to lose the war because this is another Russia.
Yeah.
We cannot do another one.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he said he knew he had to move to Canada after
Yeah.
his experience in working in the parks and building trails
Yeah.
as a prisoner of war.
Yeah.
It's an interesting thing because one of the defining things I think about Canada is the vast distances that
Yeah.
we have.
Unbelievable.
And as someone coming from the Netherlands, Holland, a very tightly packed place with so many people.
Yeah.
And you come here and it's all this space.
Yeah, I sometimes I go to Holland, not so much now, but in the earlier years when I was here, is that, so what we did is we went to Vancouver for the weekend. So we drove down Friday evening and then we came back Sunday evening because we had to go to work on Monday. Oh, how long did it take you? It takes about 9 hours to get there, 9 hours to go, but 18 hours. Are you kidding me?
See, John, you've really become a solid Canadian in your time because you have adopted a Canadian feature.
Yeah.
You measure distance in time, not
Yeah.
in kilometers.
No,
So,
exactly.
like, when someone says, how far is it to Vanderhoof? It's an hour.
Yeah, that's usually what we say. Right?
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that, but I've always thought of myself as a Canadian from the time that I was 5 years old. From that point forward, I always thought of myself as a Canadian.
Absolutely.
Really did, so that's why this Friday in particular is so important to us, the remembering.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it will be close to, for our guests watching this internationally, the Remembrance Day is usually here at around 10:30. People are coming down, and it's about...
Yeah, we'll come from, looking over your shoulder, you can see the Civic Center and the Art Gallery where we'll form up.
Right.
We'll come down Quebec, then just over to 5th,
Yeah.
down to George Street, straight to the Cenotaph.
Yeah.
I was just walking it before I came up to see you, actually,
Yeah.
to just sort of look at some of the possibilities with the snow that I'm going to have to deal with. And
Yeah,
I'm gonna
and
might have to
then
haul the shovel out
lots
here.
and lots and lots of people, hundreds of people.
We're expecting a great turnout.
Yeah, and that's pretty much so every year. It's one of those events, and
Well, even last year, when we had the restrictions opening up a bit, we had a very good turnout at the Cenotaph service.
Yeah.
We didn't do an indoor one.
No.
But we're back to an indoor service.
Yeah.
We're back to a parade. We're back to the...
And that was because of, for our guests, international guests, that was because of COVID.
Yes.
For 2 years it was not indoor, right? Was
Yeah,
it
that's right. We
two-
just did the small ceremonies at the Cenotaph.
Yeah,
That's right.
Yeah.
And it's really great to get everybody back together.
Yeah, no, it is. Now, the other thing I want to talk to you a little bit about is you have all kinds of hobbies that I found interesting. So talk to me about, and talk to tell my guest and me a little bit about your hobbies.
Well, I've got the run of the mill kind of things. I have a bit of a stamp collection,
Yeah.
which I haven't looked at a lot lately, but
Yeah.
I've been picking up again.
Not a lot of people are doing that. In Europe, when I grew up, we all did have stamps.
Well, stamps have changed nowadays. They're all
Yeah.
stickies now, right? And,
Yeah.
and it's a little bit more complicated playing with that than
Yeah.
it is it's a stamp that's not a sticker. And
Yeah.
so I understand that. So I kind of look at the older ones.
Yeah.
And I've done that as a kind of a relaxing thing. Of course, I like to read.
Yeah.
Anyone in my position, but I also enjoy shooting, hunting.
Yeah.
I try to get out with a fishing rod sometime, but I've never been very good at that. I'll have to
Yeah.
get someone to give me some tips. And my daughters, of course, have kept me busy for many years. I've been involved with biathlon with them for a while.
And they've been quite successful.
Yes, they changed from biathlon after a few years. They discovered boys and jobs and things. But,
Yeah, which is
normal.
the normal thing, right?
But they had very good runs at biathlon, and the club at the Caledonia Nordic Ski Club was a great place for them to be growing up.
Yeah.
Has preteens and teens learning how to ski,
Yeah.
life skills, and they both become quite competent, expert downhill skiers as well. So
Yeah.
I'm very, very pleased.
They live here, right?
Yes,
Do you have two daughters?
yes, Elise and Danielle.
Danielle, they have families and kids?
No, they're Elise is just 19, Danielle's 16, so she's still in high school.
Still young.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's nice to have them here in Prince George, and
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the whole bunch of us are actually here. younger sister and two younger brothers are both here.
They all kind of stayed in Prince George. Eh?
Well, they left for a while, and everybody just came back.
Yeah.
Karen was in Vancouver as an emergency nurse at Vancouver General for many years.
Okay.
And she met a fellow on an Alpine Club trip that we were on, Elizabeth Parker Hutt, and they're married and
Okay.
up here now. One of my climbing partners.
Yeah.
You lose a climbing partner and gain a brother-in-law.
Yeah.
And my brothers are both quite skilled tradesmen. Kevin's a helicopter aircraft maintenance engineer.
Okay.
And Brian is a journeyman carpenter, crane operator, and he was a journeyman floor layer as well.
Yeah.
And they're both very, very good at their trades.
Yeah.
They've got that pickiness and work ethic, the good attitude, passion, work
all
ethic,
of that,
all
right?
of that. It's
Yeah.
all deeply seated in them.
Yeah.
And they've always been very, very precise about their work.
Yeah.
So I'm proud of my brothers and my sister.
Yeah. And so you should be. Right?
They're really good people with good skills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you kind of look forward now, Sheldon, you're still relatively young.
Yeah. I got some time left, I hope.
Yeah, and you hope to stay at the college.
Yes, the college has been very good for me.
Yeah.
I've been fortunate to have some extremely good mentors
Yeah.
in my time there. I think of Gordon Ingalls, Don Prokosky, John Harris, Barry McKinnon, and so many others, like fellows who I wasn't even the same discipline, like Ron Ryan, who taught marketing there for many years before he retired. And I have seen so many good people working there over time, and who still do.
Barry McKinnon used to live next to me in Miller Edition.
That's right, in the Miller Edition.
Yeah, him and his wife Claire. His daughter is Claire. Joy.
Yeah, that's
his
right.
Daughter is Jessie. You have two kids, Jessie and Claire.
Yeah, terrific people.
They are.
And I think the community at the college has been a very strong one in terms of building a better community.
No question about that. But not only a community, but also in terms of the satellites throughout northern BC.
Absolutely,
been
yes.
extremely influential and still are moving forward, right?
Most definitely. There's so many opportunities that the college offers for people, both as university transfer or in trades.
Yeah.
And I teach in university transfer and history program.
Yeah.
We offer the ability of people to think and learn in a critical way about their past and maybe apply the lessons of the past to their present circumstances and to their futures.
Now, one of the things that I found interesting about you is that at one time when you worked for School District 57, you were involved in children that had challenges with ADHD.
Yes.
So how did you get involved in that?
Well, I was substitute teacher. I was a supply teacher.
Yeah.
But there was a program called Intensive Childcare Resource that had a number of children who had ADHD and were not able to operate well in the standard classroom environment. Right. I think at one time we had 8 students and 3 staff. And there were a lot of challenges associated with making sure that they were kept active, engaged, busy, focused. Yeah. And you had to really be on top of things as a teacher. Yeah. And as a staff member, a lot of physical activity. We did wheelchair basketball to keep the kids' energy levels going. And I remember days where none of them would show up. Some of them had been involved in bad things. There were some success stories that children came out of there and they went on to do better things. And that's really good to see. I still run into a couple of them occasionally, and they thank me for those times. Yeah. I feel like I've made a difference. Yeah. But it was a lot of supervision and a lot of energy in the room. I remember I was sitting at my desk one morning, and this young boy came in, and he opened the door with great force, and it broke the little door stop right off of its bolt. It punched a hole in the wall, just like this. He says, "Good morning, Mr. C," and he's bouncing around the room like a pinball in a machine. And I watched him for a moment, and I said, I think your medications have not been taken this morning, because he was on a program for this, and he goes, "Oh, I don't need that stuff anymore." And he was just ding, 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 ding. And then we had some dispensing capability, and he took his medications, and all of a sudden he calmed down.
Yeah.
And it was like the sun was coming through the windows.
Yeah.
And it made the room warmer. And
Yeah.
he came up to me and he said, "I think I'll work on my math today, Mr. C."
Yeah,
And
yeah.
went over and sat down and started working diligently. And,
Yeah.
and it just, you could see the change in energy.
Yeah.
But it's not a behavior that they can really control. It's there all the time. And,
Yeah.
and it's something that it requires a lot of patience.
Right.
That's my experience. And you have some personal background in this that maybe you have some more you can add with my assessment.
Well, I'm ADHD.
Yeah.
Classic, right? So hence, I failed grade 3 and I failed grade 7 3 times, and hyperactivity is part of them. The other one is difficulty in focusing on the issues at hand. Half the time I mentally was not there.
I would never have guessed that.
No.
I never
No.
really. You do not present to me as anyone that than the people I worked with.
Yeah.
But it's different for older people than younger ones. in many
I've
respects.
always been like that, and I still am very much so. But I have developed the skill sets of not only working with it, but turning it around to my benefit.
Of course,
I call
work
it
ethic.
a superpower.
Yeah.
And I could not have been successful to the extent that I'm using it for the illustration, not saying "Hurrah, hurrah, John, how successful." That's not why I'm simply saying it, that those tools that I have, serve me extremely well in all the things that I do. Because if you look at, and I again using it for illustration, failing grade 3 and then 3 times grade 7, from there on in, I became a self-educator, and I'm very good, in a number of areas, math, economics, and a number of other things that I'm I'm a good author. I wrote 2 books. I will have another one this year. I will write 1 a year, as long as I'm physically able to do that.
Well, you've discovered the secret to writing books, which is write a page a day.
Correct.
You write a page every day, you have a book a year.
Yeah, I don't work that way in the ADHD mind. I work by burst.
Of course.
Yeah, because I need the superpower that gives me that energy to hyper focus on something. And that's what I do. And, at the same time, in the forest industry in British Columbia, there is an umbrella group of the forest industry in British Columbia under the umbrella of the Council of Forest Industry.
Yes.
That all the major companies are there, and all the producers. Now, most of the companies there are tenured companies that have tenure. I'm the longest serving director on the Council of Forest Industry, and I'm their vice chair. It's somewhat amazing, really. And then, I'm an active public speaker. And I'm active in a lot of areas. And,
You've made a difference.
Yeah, and so the point is to me that's why I wrote the book. First, I wrote a book, and I'm going to give you sign a copy for you, both books that I have. The one is this one here, that is Against All Odds.
Yes.
And it's a biography about, not so much about hurrah, hurrah, John, but about with all the challenges and all the difficulties along the way, is still staying the course and then succeeding, if you wish, under those circumstances. And I aim it at people that have had challenges and say, well, I could never do that. Or because of this, that, and the other thing,
Adjust
I will
the
not
attitude. Adjust your attitude.
Yeah. And so I wrote that. It's an autobiography. I never wrote a book before in my life until this one, but I knew I had to do it well. I did my research on it, and the book is quite successful, actually, and I'm proud of it. I did this one, and then I got another one, a little bit out of my reach there. Oh, I got one
there's
here.
a closer copy.
So, and then the other one that I did is that, again, thinking about ADHD, I was 57 years old when I went to Books on 4th here, and somehow I was in that store, and I looked at the book, and I opened the book. I still don't know why I did it. Driven to Distraction was the title. And
you discovered what you had.
I said, oh my God, that is me.
Yes.
And I went through it, and kind of the guy in the store said, we're going to buy it, or what are we doing here? So, and obviously I bought it. Yeah. And I wrote in it in Dutch because I was ashamed of it. Now I finally know who I am. And then it took me, after that, probably another 5 years before I talked to my doc, who was a personal friend, delivered both our daughters, and I knew well until one day I went into his office 5 years after I discovered this and said, oh my God, now what do? I want to Google and blah, blah, blah. I'm trying to build a lumber company. What am I going to say to the banker? I want to lend X amount of millions of dollars or whatever, and but I have a mental issue that's called ADHD, and say, well, have a nice day, like in my mind.
Yeah, but it's not even relevant.
No, but so that's why the stigma around it was troubling to me at the time. And then so I talked to my doc, and I said, he said, well, why are you here? And I said, I think I got ADHD. And then him and me talked about it, and he said, I think so too. and then from there on in, it took me another number of years until he said, I said to him one day, I said, you think I should use medicine? Like, what do you think? He said, well, maybe a Ritalin or Adderall, or so he said, okay, well, let's do Adderall, try it out, see what happens. So I got a thing with 100 pills in it. I used 3 of them, didn't do nothing for me. They're still in my drawer, actually. They probably have been there for 10 years.
Doesn't surprise me in the least.
No.
I would think at being the age you were when you discovered this, you've already developed coping skills to work around.
Yeah,
and make it
not only work around it, but
make it work for you.
Make it work. I call it a superpower.
Yeah.
And I did that in this book. And basically saying, and then I wrote a book in such a way that the ADHD mind sometimes can start looking at things. This one you can pick it up, open up anywhere, and read from that point forward. I'll go back and and this one has been very, very popular. Not only here but also in Europe.
Oh, great!
And I did an audio book on both of these as well.
Wow.
Yeah, and then and I'm reading the book myself because I thought it was important. And I'm doing another one that will come out in July of next year, and we are already substantially, on our way and on target. And the title, I'm not absolutely totally sure about it, but it will be something like Finding the Passion, Living the Dream. Because the two are connected. Is that I find there are so many people that, are involved in whatever they are doing, and they're not overly happy about it. And they're saying, I hate my job. Well, if you hate your job, that's going to affect all the other elements of your life.
You have to change things when you're in a circumstance.
And that's kind of what the book talks about. In the early stages of somebody when they are young, in terms of trying to find a direction with all the challenges that you have, kind of growing through the initial stages from being a young person to an adult and all the things that are involved next. And even for people, and we interview a number of people in that particular book, that at later part of the life, they decided to make a change. You know, if they are in the 30s, 40s, or whenever, and they say, I changed direction.
Yes.
And are successful in doing that. And so I'm talking about that. And then, you know, the importance of attitude, passion, work ethic. The other part about this one is that the person that wrote the introduction to the book is Dr. Tracy Lotz. She's probably one of the more, she's not only an MD, but she's also a surgeon.
Okay.
And I would say one of the most able medical doctors in this region, and extremely popular. ADHD. And it happens now over and over again, Sheldon, that I meet people that saying, my son, my brother, my this, me, they would say to me, is, I never told anybody, but I'm ADHD. So what I'm hoping to do, at least in my world, is opening the door and saying, it's a superpower. It's
Make
not
use
a
of it.
liability.
Yeah, make use of it.
Make use of it.
Yeah.
Make it work for you. I think I have 12 companies or so, and then they said to me, how do you do it? You know, and all the other things. Well, to me, it comes natural.
You turned it into passion and work ethic.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
You had the right attitude.
Yeah.
And you just flipped your ability, your superpower,
Yeah.
into that. That's a wise way to go.
And then at the same time, I want to share that with others, you know, so it's not that I'm trying to make a fortune on my
Well, other
books.
people are having the same burden, or they
Yeah.
think it's a burden, and you're going to try and flip it to something that is going to support them.
Yeah, and so another thing, if you look at the book, and I will give it to you in a minute, I'll give it to you now, and then before I give it to you, I sign it, and obviously you get it for free, both of them.
Well, thank you.
But what do you, if I gave you the book, and you look at the back of the book, what do you see?
Wow. We see a whole bunch of people who have a lot of skills and knowledge
Right.
who are supporting what you're saying.
And what's the cost of the book?
It costs exactly what you came to Canada with, to Prince George with.
And that's the price of the book. Yeah.
It's brilliant. That's brilliant. That
So-
would have been a day's pay in those days.
Yeah, pretty much, Sheldon,
Yeah,
because
okay.
I remember the first 2 weeks that I got paid, I think it was $160 for 80 hours work.
Yep, that's a day's pay.
Yeah,
You're right.
Yeah.
You're right in Prince George with a day's pay in your
yeah,
pocket.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah,
I'm looking forward to reading this.
yeah. So I'm going to sign it for you, and
A real honor, John. I've really enjoyed our chat. This is great fun. We've talked a little bit before. I've run into you in the airport a few times, and you've always been going somewhere or coming back from somewhere, and always a story and an adventure.
yeah, and again, you know, I kind of followed you, and with all the things that you're doing in Prince George and being so active in Prince George, and your history and your family's history is so much part of Prince George, right?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I mean, I think of what Prince George was like when my grandfather came here, with around, maybe 2,400 people, and then you had the war, and then there was thousands of people here from all the soldiers that were here.
Exactly.
Then the changes in the forest industry that happened with the sawmills all being closed down and consolidated. And then when the pulp mills came, and that started to make a huge difference. And with the
Yeah.
pulp mills, you had Pacific Vocational Institute.
Yeah.
The College of New Caledonia was
Yeah.
built rather quickly after that.
Yeah.
On top of it,
Yeah.
and then so much went on to build this into the wonderful northern winter city that it is.
Yeah, and it was kind of a boom period in a way, but then it kind of settled down, and it really became, a great city to raise a family.
The recreational opportunities here are second to none.
And it is truly the center of northern BC, and it showed that in particular the leadership role when we had the terrible fires here in 2018 and 19, and where thousands of people from around came here, and were welcomed to Prince George, and then the Prince George became the true leader, working with the other communities and building the North.
It was an oasis in a
Yeah.
time of dry, smoky, desert, horrible conditions.
Yeah.
And I remember the people were setting up the colleges, classrooms as places for people to stay, and these kind of things make the city a strong place.
Yeah.
It makes people know each other better, and
Yeah.
and I think that's so critical.
Yeah. Claire, it was a pleasure, and especially it's so important now, on the 11th.
It is, my friend.
Thank you.
Real pleasure being here, John.
Yeah.